Hi everyone, welcome to Living La Vita Loca podcast, a retro gaming podcast for some of your retro gaming needs. My name is Faz.
And I'm all out of hot chocolate.
Oh, did you have a hot chocolate?
I had a hot chocolate.
Nice.
Yeah.
What do you use? Like, do you? Because I've noticed the thing with hot chocolate is that whenever I make one at home, it's always shit. Whenever I get one, like it's like a syrup from from any sort of coffee vendor that you want to name, they always seem to do a much better job of it than I do.
Yeah. We've got like Morrison's one, like the instant one.
Yeah.
But I bought the wrong one time. It's like, this is the kind that needs milk.
Yeah.
That's a lot of effort. It was bizarre.
It's so annoying when you have to boil milk to, that's why I never have them.
Steps.
Yeah.
And then, I was at a stag do at the weekend, and we went past a shop that one of my friends pointed out that was like a dedicated hot chocolate thing and a bit of a chain. And I had that moment of like, you don't have that up north. It was really weird. I've not really had that before. Unfortunately, I've already forgotten the name of the chain, but I'm told it's very good.
You don't have it up north. It doesn't matter.
Exactly.
It just doesn't matter.
Like, what am I going to do? Like, order it online?
Oh god, you get to that point now where you're like ordering. My neighbour has like a tea merchant. Like, isn't like it's
19...
Yeah, right. Yeah. Like 1935. Like turns with his little black van. Like bring and like they bring in like a weird like wooden chest. Like some sort of
premium shit.
Yeah,
Man. Like.
It's like Indiana Jones. I'm like, I was expecting to like look in it and lose my soul or something. It's just like, what kind of fucking tea is this?
When I used to work in the charity shops, you'd sometimes get like Rington's merch pop up, which is how I know about them through a shit ton of googling.
You're like, what is this?
Yeah. But yeah, like people really like them. I think someone on my road gets the Rington's dude to turn up as well.
Yeah.
I don't think that's his official job title, but I hope it is.
Yeah. Well,
but
I mean, what else
know
would
it's
it
not.
be? What else would it be? Imagine some sort of Big Lebowski tea corporation just sort of, chilled out. They're all there, like, mixing the tea with their fucking nightgowns on or something.
Flops and dressing gowns and, yeah.
This really went off subject.
It
hasn't been on subject yet, so, we could...
Right. It's only 2 minutes in. Doesn't need a subject yet.
We said we wanted to keep these short, and it's just like...
Short. It's fine. We'll just call it there.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
What some of your retro gaming needs.
That's why I always put the inflection on it, because I'm like, it is...
It's mainly bollocks.
Yeah, it's bullshit. And also, like, as in, it depends on... We're not going to get into that conversation right now, but the more that I follow retro things on the internet to try and get research for the podcast, the more that I find people argue about what retro is. And there definitely seems to be some sort of like line where it's like people are in their heads and stuff. And I'm like, retroactive to me is almost like, like last Thursday. Like, I'm like, so it's like, like I'm just glad to be alive since then. So
yeah, but like again, when I was at the charity shops and stuff like that, you'd have people labeling things as vintage. And then I'd be standing there going like, no fucking way, that's from the 90s. That's not vintage. You can call it retro if you like, but it's not vintage.
Yeah. I think if you find something hard to be able to do now, it's old. That's just
standing up in my case.
Yeah, that's retro.
It's retro.
Stand up is retro. It's so 2004.
So over it. Passe.
I now sit down in the club.
I literally do.
Where the big, horrible sofas that, like, have probably been there since the smoking ban in the UK or something like that. It's just like, and they've probably got, like, bags of cocaine stashed down the side. It's like, oh, these are for the old people. Yeah, I'll sit down. Thanks.
That's fine. That'll do nicely. Thank you.
So, we probably wouldn't be very good physically to be able to do the occupation of those we're going to speak about today, I guess.
You know what? That's a disarmingly good segue. Well done.
And those workers, employees of the Assassin's Creed. So we have chosen to speak about our PSP and PS Vita again today, and we have played through, what is it? You've got Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation on the PS Vita.
Sort of a spin-off of 3.
Yeah. And mine is Bloodlines, which is actually a direct sequel to the first Assassin's Creed, which was quite pleasant.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, no. Quite pleasantly surprised to find out.
It shows what I know about it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think I know anything about it, and I've played through it, so...
Sweet.
Yeah, it's very fine. So... Yeah, are you part of the Creed? Have you played a lot of Assassin's Creed?
I was once.
When I could stand up.
Once upon a time. I was definitely of the sort of the ACIII Assassin's Creed 2 kind of generation.
Yeah.
Dabbled a little bit with Black Flag. My wife spent dozens of hours on Odyssey.
Okay.
We both tried Valhalla and bounced straight off it.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
It went really long, that, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but we kind of wanted it to be a little bit more, have a bit more like levity to it. It's quite dour, and wasn't really scratching an itch.
Yeah.
But yeah, like back in the day, I did really enjoy them. I played the first one quite a lot as well, thinking about it. But Assassin's Creed 2 and the follow-ons, and particularly the multiplayer, back in the day, I used to really, really enjoy the multiplayer.
I didn't even know. I mean, that sounds ridiculous because obviously there should be a multiplayer. But what is the multiplayer that you can play on Assassin's Creed on?
You can't play it anymore, I don't think.
Yeah, but
I think all of the re-releases have even taken it out fully. But basically, the idea was that you and a group of other players were dropped into a little map, and you had groups of NPCs milling around and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And none of you were playing as like the assassins as you would recognize them with the kind of white robes and all that kind of clobber. But you're basically like NPC models, so like the non-player characters.
Yeah.
And the idea is that it's almost like a kind of social stealth thing.
Yeah.
So you would be able to detect people based on like sound, and other than that, like you're kind of looking out for like erratic movements, and say if they are jumping from rooftop to rooftop, you know that's an assassin. But you can blend into the crowds, you can sit on the benches and all that kind of stuff, you can hide. And so the aim of the game would be to try and effectively trick the other players into thinking that one of the other like computer controlled characters was an assassin, or you just were a computer controlled character.
Yeah.
So
Assassin's Creed Among Us.
yeah, effectively, yeah, and that's why it's so frustrating that the multiplayer died a death.
It sounds great.
I
it
really,
sounds so good.
Genuinely think it was so far ahead of its time. But yeah, like it was really fun back in the day. But it was the sort of thing that you would basically be like pacing around for 10 minutes and then just shanking someone. But if you managed to pull it off and like outfox another player. Yeah. My God, it was so satisfying.
I know, I bet that feels amazing. Like, I feel like that was probably the same era as Metal Gear Solid 4 online was a thing, and I was a massive like lover of that, and it was sort of having there was a bit more stealth to that and stuff, and that was like and taking your time to do something while online, like and like you say, just getting that payoff of, oh shit, I've actually done it for the one time in the 75 attempts.
It'd be crazy tense as well. And I mean, I'm saying all this from memory, so I could be wrong on some of the details. But I remember having really good fun with it.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I probably a similar sort of vein, really. I think I played one. I've played a couple. I haven't even played that much of two, and I've got the ACIII collection sat there. Like, I don't even know if it's a remastered collection or it's just gathered together sort of a little bit afterwards. And obviously everyone says that 2 and 4 are probably, and certainly the collection of 2 and ACIII's collection is probably the best you get of Assassin's Creed. I played about half of Origins, but I got 25 hours into that, and I was like, how many more hours am I going to do with this? That is, I was just like, it feels like I'm just doing the same sort of thing, even though it's a big world. And then funnily enough, when I was researching, looking into the podcast this week and stuff, I saw that actually a lot of people said that about Origins. Actually, Odyssey kind of tied that up a little bit. And they said that Valhalla was extremely long, but very good. So I think I'm probably out of the Assassin's Creed world of modern time. I think the most recent, is it Mirage, the most recent one? I think that's quite short and sweet, actually, comparatively. So be interested to see what that was like, whether or not that was sort of more my cup of tea. I've not heard much about it, to be honest.
I was going to say, was that one meant to be going more back to the roots kind of thing? So yeah, might be worth looking at.
So yeah, I mean, I guess, should I go first? Because I've got the
if you like,
chronologically the first Assassin's Creed out of our both.
Sure, so, I'm going to have more sweets.
Well, I mean, we've already smashed an entire bag of sports mixture.
That's my fault.
It's not. It's like sports mix. We were just commenting before we were commenting before the pod. So they used to be much harder, and they used to be much more like midi gems, and now, since sort of you're not allowed E numbers in there or plastics, like you can't the shit now. So it's nowhere near as good as it used to be. So probably too chewy for a podcast. So it's probably good we finish them off. So yeah, Assassin's Creed Bloodlines. Then so I guess this came a couple of years after the first Assassin's Creed, straight to PSP, and it carries on Altair? Yeah, Altair. Yeah, that makes more sense. Altair's story a little bit. So you could, and as you seem to have, you could completely pass this by and not worry about what happened to Altair, because actually that gets kind of tied up in the Ezio sort of story, I believe, a little bit. The end of his sort of, well, I guess his bloodline, really. But,
Spoilers.
Yeah. Well, and that is in, I guess that you see the end of Altair's story, I believe, in the sort of second or the third or fourth, whatever, some sort of Assassin's Creed anyway. So this is kind of like, I guess you call it his middle life, his middle ground, his second album, if you will. And it is a difficult second album, if I'm going to be honest. It wasn't warmly received necessarily at the time, but I'll go through what I experienced with it, because there was some redeeming features about it that kind of made me feel like, actually, it's worth playing in parts. So yeah, it was. How do I start this? Really, from a story point of view, I was quite interested because I played the Assassin's Creed one, and it made me feel like, I remember what happened in that, and there was some sort of investment, but it was a very thin story almost as well. It's just like, Altair goes to Cyprus to stop the Templars being alive. Like, I don't, it's just almost like that was kind of like,
that's sort of his thing.
Yeah, it's just sort of like, it was just the usual, like, like the Templars have got an archive there, I think, that they keep all of their Gardens of Eden or whatever. Apples of Eden or whatever, all the Templar bits that they keep, like, those secret bits. So anyway, and he's going to investigate that after he's done his job in the first game. So he's become the head of the Creed, and that's what he's going to go do. He bumps into I can't remember her name. Is it Maria? Sort of bumps into a female protagonist who becomes his wife at the end of the story. Right. That is in. There is no indication during this story that, like, this is kind of like, I think they're meant to be, at the end of it, become sort of friends. And actually it's quite nice because you don't see that evolution of just like, I fall in love with you during this 1 8-hour PSP game, which is good because there's no indication that's going to happen. Like, she fucking hates his guts. Like, it's in, like, she's like, until like the very last minute. Like, it's in, she's like, detests him, and then she's like, like, what are you going to do? He's like, I'm going to travel the world. She's like, I'll come with you. It's like, like, so it's like, it just doesn't make any sense. But she's the first person you battle, effectively. So the first piece of action you experience in this game is actually a fight against her. Man, the combat is shit. It is, like, throughout the entire game, this is a horrendously put together combat system. When I say put together, it's one button. The one button being square. Like, you get different weapons. So you get your little dagger things, whatever you call them.
The hidden blades.
Thank you. Yeah, dagger things. So you can tell I'm a real Assassin's Creed fan over here.
That was difficult to watch. Just for, everyone listening, what I got this end with the bit was a little sort of
it was
wiggly movement with each hand. It was definitely Spider-Man.
It was a Spider-Man thwip. I've got a Spider-Man t-shirt on. That's maybe what it is. So yeah, he's got his little daggery blade things, and then you get a weird, like, a big long sword as well. Like, it just feels like I want to jump a bit here and come back to it. There is a mechanism where you just hold X and it blends you into being into. I guess you're meant to look like an NPC. Yeah. So when you're walking around Cyprus, these guards that are sort of you just walking past in the uniform you always wear, like, as in, I'm sorry, why all the fucking assassins look exactly the same? Or we're all just going to wear the white hoods and just like as soon as you see that person, you're like, probably an assassin. But yeah, you're wearing this garb, and then, like, you press X, and all of a sudden you're walking past them with a massive longsword hanging down your legs, and, like, and you've got, like, daggers on your arms. You're like, that guy's blending well. He's all X. It's just, like, so ridiculous. But you use this longsword in combat the most often, and all you're doing is just tapping square. And the guards, and in this first battle against, I'm going to continue to call this person Maria, you just keep on hitting her, but she's got her guard up with her sword, but you continue to do damage. That is and that's how you win the fight. You don't have to do anything else. And then you kind of think, oh, maybe it's just one of those fights where it's like, you know, effectively it's a cutscene and you're moving on to that, you know, the next stage because she becomes your hostage. Which is fine, but then all the fights are like that. Like, as in all the enemies, the enemy AI is terrible. You just literally you press square once, and it'll like parry like any random guard. They'll parry you. You do it again, they'll parry you. Third time, you just kill them. That is, it just goes through their sword and just kills them. And that's like, it just doesn't make any sense. Like,
sounds like the game gets bored.
It is. Yeah, the game got bored. The person playing the game got bored. There is like a dodge mechanism and like a parry sort of like thing you can do where you can roll around, but you don't really need to use that, and you don't. Apart from in the boss battles and that's when the boss battles get harder towards the end of the game, and even there was one battle that I struggled with, and actually I kind of just broke that battle by hiding behind some massive stone columns and waited for the boss to kind of get tired, effectively, and just kind of bobbed round the column and just bopped them with my sword and hid behind the column again because I was struggling to beat them. But then the very final boss, for example, is a chap called Bouchard, I think it is. Basically, it's the exact same combat the entire way through the game. You've just got to dodge him a little bit more. Like, as in, like, and that's it, though. It was really annoying that a game that had moved on from Assassin's Creed, the very first Assassin's Creed, and at this point, I think Assassin's Creed 2 was just about to come out, how well that flowed and all the parkour that you can do. You can still do that part of this in this game quite well. It's not too bad climbing up walls and traversing rooftops and things. But in terms of getting into any battle or any combat whatsoever, or any enemy AI, it's truly dreadful. Like it's really poor. You know, like I guess I could continue with that as well. Like there was one specific sequence where you are tasked with helping a palanquin, which is one of those beds with the curtains around them that someone sits in and 4 or 5 people carry them.
What am I thinking of? Oh, a pangolin.
Yeah. they're fucking awesome. I love pangolins. They're so weird. So this and then
I thought you were going to say you were escorting a pangolin or something.
that would have been so much better. It would have been so much better. It would have probably worked better. You're escorting this palanquin, and it's like the neutral NPCs and the people who are effectively on your side who are escorting this palanquin, and then the enemies that are also attacking this palanquin or are there to attack it. It's like every single person in the entire game is nonplussed that you were there. That is, it's just like they don't think that you exist, which is obviously probably maybe just a really good assassin. Maybe I'll say, yeah, it's just so good. Everyone's like, oh, we're in an Assassin's Creed game. Who knew? It's just like you're killing people on rooftops, and you're knocking. At one point, it breaks the game where at least I did, where a body fell into the cutscene and like through the palanquin, and these guys are just continuing to really slowly carry this palanquin like over this dead body, and I'm like, everyone's chill about that, right? It's just like, so you're okay with that? That's fine. So yeah, it just other circumstances where, and I find this to be probably a turning point in games, not this specific game, but in my head, certainly from a gaming history, where, you know, it would be like, oh, infiltrate this enemy fortress and assassinate this person. So you go and do that, and you've got some difficulty in trying to do that stealthily. Sometimes a game would stop you and say, look, you've been found, no dice. And there's a couple of times in this where you can do that, but mostly it would be like, oh, if you get found in this, you're like, oh, just run away, it's fine. Okay, I don't like it when it does that. You know, there should be some sort of consequences if you are found in a stealth game. You shouldn't be able to just fight your way out of it. But then, even if you do get in there stealthily and you, assassinate this person, like you do it, and the game has the idea that it has like sort of 20 or 30 guards around you at once. You kill him. Oh, the guard just kind of wander off, like as in, you know, like go and have a fucking cigarette break or something. And it's just like, no, I just killed your leader, and that's fine, is it? Like,
maybe they hate him.
Yeah, but it's just like, and I think I remember in like, even though I love Grand Theft Auto 3, like, as in, I think I remember that kind of thing happening where you'd be like, you just turn and like get machine gun somebody, like, and it'd be like, you know, mission passed. $100,000, and it'd be like, and then everyone's just kind of getting on with the business, walking off from it, you know, like, and it's just the same thing happened this so many times. It'd be like, you could just drop in, like, be stood right beside the main enemy and be like, stab, And then like everyone just turned around like, he's done. Oh well, like as in we won't bother with it. And I feel like the enemy AI throughout the entire game just continued to just be the most stupid I've seen of a game of, from 2009. I would have thought it would have evolved better by that point.
Yeah.
And I'm wrong. A few positives about the game. There are sort of chunk-sized maps that are quite nice to walk around in. That is in so. I'd say they're quite sizable, really, for a PSP game. What they seem to pare back on those maps, though, is that graphically it's really impressive. That is in you still get the sort of the eagle view across an entire chunk-sized map. But it does look great. But then when you're wandering around, everything's really angular and bland. It's all one shade, and I guess that might be of the era. But at the same time, it's really noticeable. Like you're like, this graphically is performing really, really well, but I'm just seeing the same thing, and that might be why it's performing really well, because it must be easy for them to just develop that way. But yeah, so it's kind of chunked into nice sort of sizable areas. But again, it commits that cardinal sin of you leave one area getting chased by 15 guards, you go through a gate, which is like a weird sort of like glowing white gate, and then you go into the next area, it's like they're all just, no one cares. It's like there's a chicken farmer there going, "You're all right, mate." So, but yeah, generally it's quite well set out. The control system, you would think that the PSP would struggle because of obviously having the lack of buttons, and you think how many different things you need to do the parkour. But actually, I think it speaks quite well for Assassin's Creed in a way that it's very intuitive, that you only have to usually hold one or two buttons to do quite a few things, like running across rooftops or jumping down things, and then PSP continues that. So actually, I went in thinking, I bet the controls are terrible, and actually they were okay. That is in, nice. Apart from the combat, that is in. But again, that wasn't a controls fault. That was just they could have mapped all the buttons to more control facets. They just didn't.
Yeah.
So it was all right, and like I said, the story is nice and simple. There's no Animus bullshit. Is in you are constantly Altair. That is in the loading menus, and when you go in and out of chapters, if you will, you're in the Animus. But no one ever explains why that is. So no one ever says, why are you playing as Altair?
So we don't do the sci-fi
you don't need to.
You're playing as an ancestor bit,
which is quite good in a way, because it's almost like it just assumes that, really, and you don't have to worry about it. And I guess that weirdly, I think if they'd been able to put that into the game, they probably would have done. But because they were probably thinking, actually, it's a bit too much putting it onto a UMD. Maybe we can't. And actually, I think it's better for it. Certainly from a point of view that if you just want to tell this part of the story of Altair's story, then actually, why would you need to keep on coming in and out of Desmond, I think it is, or whatever it is from Assassin's Creed?
It was around that time,
But then, I was genuinely quite invested in Altair's sort of story. But he does become really preachy. Like, he's got a lot of preachy bullshit. He's like, at the end, like, he regularly between sort of chapters will be writing into a script or a scroll, I think, to sort of speak to his creed. And he'll be saying things like, who are we to say what life is and stuff like that. And I'm like, you've just fucking murdered everyone. Like, isn't how many NPCs have I sort of had to press square 3 times on and slash through, and you just sort of and you're like, oh, all holier than thou and stuff, and I'm like, you're a fucking murderous bastard. Like, don't come, don't come this with, you're sort of like, oh, what should we do with our time on the earth? I'm going to go find myself. It's just like, fuck off, mate. So, yeah. I guess I made the point really at the start and sort of said that, do I recommend this game? I'd give it a 5 out of 10.
Right.
Where it's almost like the very precipice of it could be teetering into a game that I wouldn't recommend playing. The one thing it did make me do is want to play more Assassin's Creed games, but better Assassin's Creed games. I would say this is from what I've played of Assassin's Creed and what I've seen around, other people playing and reviews and things, I think this is probably the worst Assassin's Creed game that there is. But the bar for that is okay-ish. Like, I completed the story and I didn't hate myself afterwards.
Well, that's something.
Do you know what I mean? So it's almost like, it was like, to the point where it's like, whereas I've played games when we've been doing these podcasts where I'm like, I hated that I spent time on that. Whereas actually I was like, that... If it had been maybe a couple of hours longer, I would have been like, okay, you're outstaying, you're welcome. But actually, it was nice and compact. You know, like, and again, I have the lovely hindsight of I paid a couple of quid for it, whereas actually if I'd paid £25-30 for it when it came out, it probably would have been a bit like, ugh. So, but yeah, it was okay. It is, but I think probably it's probably good for me now to be like, oh, I can probably play Assassin's Creed and go, wow, this is fucking incredible compared to what I just played. So, but yeah, that was me. So
I'm glad you kind of went first, if I'm being honest, because I think a lot of what you're saying has helped me kind of get my head around how I wanted to approach this, because I wasn't entirely sure what kind of score I would give, but I think I know now. So for Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation, which is a weirdly difficult title to say.
yeah.
Now that I've tried it.
Creed Libs.
Yeah. You're playing as Aveline de Grand Pré.
Which is easier to say. That's nice.
Weirdly so, yeah. But you're in New Orleans in the 1700s. So between that, the fact that she is a black woman with a bit of French going on as well, and like the whole game does try to approach the whole the slavery thing that was rife at the time in the area, to say the least.
There's a bit knocking about, yeah.
A little bit of it. But like it's the kind of thing that I've said before about I think it was Sonic the Hedgehog, and like how I felt it needs to take some like big creative risks and have a couple of big swings. This for me felt like a bit of a big swing for Assassin's Creed, because it was trying to grapple with some of those issues, and the notion of privilege and class, and how all those things wrap together. And you are in the city, you do go out to the bayou and all that kind of stuff, and you have these personas. So when you are in your assassin stuff, it's more like a kind of mercenary outfit.
Okay.
And you have these notoriety levels. So you can never get your notoriety when you're wearing that outfit down to 0. So you're always going to be spotted by the guards eventually.
Yeah.
But you also have your kind of lady persona, which is, high society, nice dress, like a parasol that can fire darts and all that kind of stuff. And you also have a slave persona.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, oh.
Yeah. So you can like sneak into places by like picking up a box and walking past a guard because you're meant to look like you're working somewhere, or the lady can charm people or bribe them to get past and things like that. So like it tries to do some different things with each of these different personas.
It's nice that... Sorry, I want to stop you there. Because that is nice to hear the evolution from my game, where I was complaining about you just walking around with a sword and everyone's like chill about it.
Yeah.
It's actually, sounds really cool that they've tried that.
The AI is still fucking stupid. Which we will come to.
It's the same guys. Templars, you're all fucking idiots.
I do wonder.
How do they end up ruling the world or whatever they do? Do they do something like that? I don't know. I can't remember. Who even knows?
But the like you were saying about the sort of the Animus and the whole sci-fi aspect where you're playing as, memories of an ancestor and all that kind of stuff, that's ditched. It goes with the Abstergo entertainment stuff, so it highlights at the beginning that you are playing a game, with the implication being that it's a game that the Templars put together and all that kind of stuff. That said, like between that and the setting and the character and the slavery stuff, it all feels like it is taking those big creative swings, and it feels like it needs a bigger game. It needs more elbow room. Like some of the plot points, and I've not finished it, but some of the plot points I've seen so far feel like they need more room for proper exploration.
Okay.
Maybe even with the benefit of 12 years hindsight. Nowadays, you wonder if they were telling the same story again, they would do it in a bit more of a sensitive way a couple of times.
Yeah.
Like the slave persona being a pretty good example, because it's just sort of glossed over pretty quick. And there's a lot of kind of gaps maybe not gaps in the plot, but it's not particularly good at explaining itself. So you have this character who's, living with white step parents in a big house, and they're tea importers or something like that. And
back to the tea.
Well,
back to the tea.
Her biological mother goes missing in the sort of early stages of the game and stuff like that. And then suddenly you are, thrust into this kind of world where, you are high society lady, but also helping to liberate people on the side and all that kind of stuff. So like, there's some really interesting stuff. It's just that the plot doesn't really give itself enough time to explore like why any of this is happening or really give you much of the kind of motivation. And I think it is there. It's just, I think it's buried in things like collectible diary pages or bits and bobs like that.
How often does that happen in handheld games?
Well, exactly.
Crazy, it just seems to be the norm.
So the prime example was there's this one guy that you go to early on in a mission, or in the first set of missions rather, and he starts, suggesting you do stuff, which you do. Yeah. And then you're like, who the fuck was that guy? and I ended up looking in the manual. It's like, oh, he's one of the assassins too. Right. You didn't fucking say that in the game, did you? And it's that sort of thing where it's definitely of its time, where a lot of that kind of stuff was in the manuals, was explained in the kind of supplementary literature. And I do think that were they to revisit it nowadays, that's the kind of thing that would help iron out a lot of the stuff in the story points that I've seen so far.
I was just looking up there. It has been brought back out as a remaster in 2019. So, and I always find when we have these conversations, it interesting to think of from a point of view of people that have never had a PSP or a PS Vita, and then these games that pop onto the PlayStation Store as a remastered, and you go, oh, I'm going to pick that up, and you just think like, I wonder what people must think when they're like, this feels half baked because I'm reading all these logs and actually there's no dialogue or story or
that's the thing, because I wonder in that particular case if the remaster was just like a graphical polish, or if they did actually take the time
put something into it,
put a little bit more meat on the bones, like narrative wise. Because I think the character's really interesting, the setting's really interesting, and if anything, I kind of feel a little bit disappointed because I just wanted more from it. And I think it's capable of it, like, but it just doesn't quite sort of stick the landing from what I've seen so far. And I do like have to emphasize the fact that I've not finished it. But going back to the graphics, and I can see why they would possibly put out a remaster, because it is a bit rough around the edges, to say the least.
As well.
Yeah, like, so that sort of flashback sequence that I mentioned at the start, you're straight into it with not much of a kind of warning. You are just playing as a little girl, but everything's like doing that kind of really fuzzy, washed out, kind of almost like peachy hued kind of thing, which by the time you are playing as grown up Aveline, it makes more sense. But at the time, you're just like, my God, it's like, this is so blurry. Like, it's practically unplayable. And then lo and behold, it does crispen up a bit. But that means that you can see things like people walking through walls, or like the awful pop-in, which if you're running through New Orleans, like, credit where credit's due, they try and put a lot of like other characters on those streets, but like they can appear right in front of you if you're not careful, and stuff like that. And exactly like you were saying about people just kind of not really paying much attention to what's going on. If you get your notoriety up, you can go as the lady and assassinate witnesses. Doesn't matter if they actually saw you. You like be like 4 fucking miles away and you have to go kill them. They seemingly know who you are. And it's the sort of thing that if you run, like, the AI is hokey enough that, like, I ended up with, well, I'm pretty sure I ended up having to kill about half of New Orleans at one point, because you get like muggers and stuff like that. So there was this trio of louts trying to push me around when I was a lady on my way to assassinate a witness, the bastards. I was
just trying to do your job.
Yeah, just trying. I was like, you know what? I'll just run away from them. Right, I will run. And I ran, and then that alerted the guards somehow, and I'm still not entirely sure how. And like, my notoriety was creeping up, and then it ended up with more guards following, and then more guards, and then more guards. Then I ended up down a dead end. Then I ended up having to kill all of them, and by which point the frame rate is tanking like nobody's business. And then I have to go and find a load of witnesses to kill again. And it was at this point that I found out,
go out and kill the witnesses.
Just go and fast walk instead. If I fast walked as a lady, I could walk up to them, stab them in the face, and the mates of theirs that are standing right next to him just see him fall over after this random woman's walked up to him in an alleyway. And they're just like, oh.
She approached correctly.
That is exactly it. So there's all sorts of things like that. Like, I could be here for quite a while going through different examples of that sort of thing. that just ruins the immersion of it, and it feels like it gets to the stage that it starts to detract a little bit from the gameplay. Because like you were saying about just hacking away, and then after the second block, they're going to keel over in a minute. You just feel like you get these little tactics for basically circumventing the whole point of the gameplay.
It just... it's so annoying because it feels like it just breaks the rest of the game, doesn't it? It's just like, and I just feel like, I don't know, you feel like game developers, like, I feel so bad because we're just two guys sat in a bedroom talking about, games and sort of like taking them to pieces and stuff. But you think they must realise at some point that they're like, oh, look at all this good work we've done. And it's like, oh, we're just going to have to live with this really shit bit. But the shit bit really makes the game terrible.
Yeah, like in this particular case, I don't think it's so bad that it's like game breaking, but it is bad enough that it's immersion breaking.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And that and people walking through walls that never helps. But it
always freaks me out when I see it happen.
Yeah. But it's the kind of thing where like the combat can be so sluggish that's kind of extra incentive to be stealthy, but it can be quite difficult to be stealthy because it is trying to do more of that kind of social stealth stuff, like the multiplayers that we mentioned earlier. So it was really nice to see that it was trying to embrace some of that stuff and do something a little bit different. But it just doesn't quite feel like it sticks the landing.
Yeah.
And then you end up with stuff like the because it's on a Vita, obviously there are random extra bits of control.
Bells and whistles.
So you can use the touchscreen for the menus. You don't have to. Well done. Yeah. There's points there. But there are things like when you're in the out in the bayou, you can use the rear touchpad to canoe. So you're kind of flicking the rear touchpad with the rhythm of the paddling and stuff like that. You don't have to. Yeah. But you can do.
Oh,
I was like, you know what?
Yeah.
That's all fine. But then it makes you open letters by putting your thumb or your finger, whichever way around you want to do it, on the front and the other on the back. So you're kind of making a pinching motion over the top of the Vita and then swiping along it like you're tearing the top bit off, which is kind of cool. But I saw it like once and I had to do it. Yeah. It's like, that's that kind of bullshit where it's just like, did you need to put that in?
How have I papercut myself on my Vita?
Yeah,
just like hands bleeding.
Yeah.
What's going on?
So like that, it does. It takes a lot of big risks.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately the kind of the technical side of it lets it down. If they had gone in and released this on the PS3 first, I think we'd be talking about it quite differently. I think it could have been something really, really special potentially. And for me, and I know I have said this like God knows how many times, the Vita is like a prime example of squandered potential.
Yeah.
And for me, this is probably the best example of that, where you sit down, you play it for a couple of hours, you can absolutely see the potential this game had.
Yeah.
And yet it just stumbles just enough to kind of take your enthusiasm away from it.
Yeah.
Which is a real shame, because I think the core ideas at the heart of the narrative are potentially incredibly interesting and warrant a bit of exploration, but it just doesn't quite, pull you through the mechanical, technical side of things enough to follow it.
That's interesting, because it just feels like not necessarily the opposite of Bloodlines, but certainly the technical part of Bloodlines was pretty good. It was just it was almost the rest of it that wasn't necessarily great, and it sounds like the other way around. I mean, it does, when you've described the story to me, like as in, and I'd kind of done a little bit of looking into it and stuff, but it does sound like, you're like, oh, this sounds like a perfect setting, a perfect antagonist, and makes complete sense for Assassin's Creed to go down that road. And it's a shame that I guess the other parts of the game kind of let it down a bit, really, or the Vita even.
Well, that's the thing, and you have things like I think what's particularly frustrating is you have things like there was the DLC for Black Flag that dealt with a lot of very similar themes in very broad strokes, but was based on the Black Flag world and mechanics and all that kind of stuff, and so it held together so much better and was better for it. So if this, say, had come out as DLC for Assassin's Creed 3, maybe, You know, it's that kind of thing where you start to wonder if there was a different way they could have approached it.
Yeah.
To kind of do it justice.
Yeah.
And as it is, you know, you have things like you can start to unlock kind of trading missions and stuff like that, where you're kind of dispatching teams of people that you never see. You know, it all works on a timer and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, getting resources and money and all that kind of stuff. Or you can go around buying up shops and, you know, developing a little empire of your own and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Did I need any of that? Like, I personally would absolutely have jettisoned a lot of that in favor of a slightly tighter technical experience. I would have taken a smaller map. I would have taken fewer NPCs on the street to really sharpen it. Tighten it up a little bit, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So yeah, for me, it's a bit of squandered potential. So I'm gonna give it 6 out of 10 with a heavy heart. Like it is, I think it's absolutely worth looking at if you're a fan. It's probably, I mean, I've not played the remaster, but I would imagine that would probably help with some of the technical stuff. To the extent that now I'm sitting here talking about it, I might see if I could grab it cheap somewhere myself, just in the name of curiosity.
It's on the Switch and stuff as well. PlayStation Store. So yeah, I mean, it sounds like something I'd want to play. Like you say, maybe if it's in a better position. So no, I think that sounds fair enough. That isn't, you know, it does enough for you to want to play it, but it's probably got more in the locker somewhere.
Yeah, so, I think so, yeah.
No, cool. I mean, the thing that you just described there about the Empire and buying things up and stuff, that's always a killer for me in games.
Yeah.
It's like they're just trying to put things filler in, and you're like, you didn't need the filler. Like, why do you didn't need to San Andreas, like GTA, going back to another GTA thing, like, where they start putting the gang wars in towards the end and stuff, and I'm like, you know, it's like, oh, you've got to like kick around for another couple of hours to do gang war things, and I'm like, just finish the storyline, just land, you know, just land.
That's the thing. It almost
land
feels to me like it's a lack of confidence in their own story.
Yeah,
like, and I'm sure that's not always the case. It's just that's quite often how it comes across to me.
Yeah,
where they don't feel like they can end the story now. They need to add in an extra 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours of gameplay and then end it. It's like, no, you don't have to. Like, the story is at a good point to tell a good ending. Embrace it, use it, go with it. Like, I don't mind. If I care that much, I will play more of it. I will go back and start again or something. Yeah. But yeah, it feels like a bit of a shame in this particular case, I think.
So you'd think that we would heed our own warnings and land the pod and just go, yeah, look, that's it, we're done. We're confident in what we've done. But I'm more confident in the part that I've just prepared for this podcast. that I was sat there thinking, you know, like, effectively, the word creed is in a lot of things. Which sounds ridiculous, but it is. And a lot of things that I kind of like, you just kind of come across in everyday life. So, without further ado, then, I want to ask you the question of what you think out of this list of creeds is the most successful creed. So, what, in inverted commas?
Right. Apollo.
Yeah. Well, he's on the list.
Right.
So, I'm going to give you the list of creeds that I've got, and I want you to determine, for the listeners out there that really care about this kind of shit, which is nobody but me, you know, which is the most successful creed. That's my sort of the point.
Successful creed.
So, is it? And then I'm going to go through the list, and you have to make a decision.
Okay. Can you wait a second?
No,
while I'm just checking.
Absolutely not. No, there is no waiting.
Well, the remaster for Assassin's Creed 3 includes Liberation as DLC.
Oh, right, okay.
Which is that's all Brilliant. I was trying to check. So I think that's the kind of thing that if you were looking to play it, that would be the route I'd recommend.
Yeah, and I've not played Creed 3 either. So
there you go.
Yeah. And because it doesn't come up as, I think there's something to do with the protagonist isn't that nice, or people don't like it. I don't know. There's something or other about Creed 3 that makes it a bit like, you know, not as loved as the others.
It's not as
2 and 4.
But so, might keep an eye out. Right, I've got my tank fast sticks. You've got your list.
So speaking of which, then, the best rated, generally agreed, Assassin's Creed is number 2.
Right.
Okay, that's the first thing on the list. The best selling Assassin's Creed, Black Flag, 15 million copies sold. Apollo Creed, 49 fights, 47 wins, 46 by technical knockout, heavyweight champion of the world, fictional. Yep. Adonis Creed, his son, 28 fights, 27 wins, 26 by technical knockout, heavyweight champion of the world, fictional. Creed Humphrey. Do you know who Creed Humphrey is?
Not off the top of my head.
He's not fictional. He's real, in the real life. And this is why I kind of started making the list in the first place. So I was like, I've got another Creed here. Creed Humphrey, 24 years old, 2-time Super Bowl champion, offensive lineman of the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, right.
Creed Humphrey. Austin Creed, who goes by either the name Austin Creed or Xavier Woods, a WWE wrestler who's been 12 times tag team champion. Creed, the band. 3 multi-platinum... Sorry, 3 multi-platinum albums. 9th best-selling musical act of the 2000s in the USA.
Really?
Yeah, no.
Huh.
A chap called Creed Bratton. 5 Screen Actors Guild nominations for performance in The Office USA, and the singer in The Grassroots. I've only got a couple more, don't worry.
I was going to say, this is a longer list than I was expecting.
I told you went into depth about it. The House of Creed is an authentic perfume house dedicated to the creation of highly original artisan fragrances for men and women made from the finest ingredients the world has to offer. It's about £190 a bottle. It sold for £3.5 billion last year as a company.
I'm in the wrong game.
Yeah, Assassin's Creed. And then the Nicene Creed. This is the most widely used creed in Christianity. Adopted by the First Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, it affirms the divinity of Jesus Christ and the Holy Trinity.
Sorry, is that nice ear?
Nicene. Nicene,
right,
sorry.
Right.
Yeah, no, that one, yeah. So they're all your creeds. Yeah. Which do you think is the most successful creed out of all those?
The most successful creed of a bunch of successful creeds.
I wasn't even drunk when I was doing this. I was just bored. Christ. I was just sat for about 45 minutes looking up the word creed.
Austin Creed is a personal favourite of mine.
I thought that might tickle your fancy.
Well, I mean, he's a wrestler, but he's also got like a YouTube and stuff, isn't he?
Yeah.
Like, was it up, down, or something like that?
See, you know about your creeds.
I know my creeds.
Yeah.
I think I'll go with him.
Oh wow, that's cool. I mean, I figured that might be a personal one of yours. Yeah. So yeah, that's good. I'm really happy that you got out of that list something really important. So yeah, it really landed the end of that podcast there. That was worth about 45 minutes of my time, and we hope you enjoyed the rest of it before that, and sit around and think about your favourite creed, with arms wide open. That was Creed.
Was it? Was it? I was getting ready to phone an ambulance.
Yeah. Okay, thanks very much, guys.
Cheers.